A very good evening to you and welcome to Biz in Focus. You are joining me as Rasan, and with me tonight is Dhananath Fernando, CEO of Advocata Institute. A very good evening to you.
A very good evening, Azra.
Dhananath, now first things first. Political instability in the country, a crisis, and so many things happening right now in Sri Lanka. How has this affected the economy as a whole?
Yes, Azra, I think there is no need for an economic expert to say how bad is the situation and how it's definitely going to impact the economy for multiple reasons, because when you have political instability, people are reluctant to invest, and when the policy environment is uncertain and the business environment is uncertain, no one is going to invest or would like to come and do business. So our situation is, it seems we have two prime ministers, which we are in trouble of deciding who is actually the real prime minister. Indeed, it's a constitutional crisis. That also in other hand shows how vague is our constitutional conditions, because we are in a situation, by simply reading a constitution, we as general citizens can't understand really what's the situation and what has really happened. On the other hand, on a different perspective, in terms of businesses, we are already we are in a crisis, and this crisis
we have been in one, and it's only getting worse.
Exactly, we have been in a crisis since 2012. Because after the war, we had economic growth rate at about 9%, at about 8 to 9%, and which dropped to about 5% in 2013. And for the last 2 years, we had been running at about 4% economic growth rate. And the most optimistic prediction for this year is about again 4.5% to 5%, which is not at all a satisfactory number given the expectation of the people. Because if you really want to jump to a rich country or like a high income earning country, we have to at least maintain about 9 to 8% economic growth for the next few years. If I put it into things into perspective, from independence we have been running at about 4% economic growth. That shows if we run at the same phase, we will be Malaysia which is today in 2038.
Right.
At least if we have a modest rate at about 6%, we will be in Malaysia, where Malaysia is today, in 2031. We will be in Singapore in 2080 if we run at 4%. That's the average we have been since independence, and we will be if we run at 6%, we will be in where Singapore is today in 2060. So that's the impact on people like you and I and the common people. So it will be slow down. We are moving forward and becoming rich, and we are becoming older before we becoming rich.
But are we actually moving forward? I mean, can you see like a better future in the...
Exactly, no. That's what I said. We have been, we were in a crisis, and this is going to be worsen the situation, because of course for the last since Friday the country is at a standstill. Nothing is moving, and it seems it will continue for the next few days or few weeks. That means we are hitting the end of this year. It would be probably end of November, because the parliament has been prorogued till 16th of November. So when things are getting settled, it would be end November, and then we are moving to Christmas, and as you know, then it's a festive season, nothing is going to happen. At the same time, our economy is not doing well, and the dollar has been our rupee has been
depreciated again
till 175.
Yes.
Our exports are not doing good at all. So things are gonna bad further given the situation.
But Dhananath, now we have the authority is constantly reminding us that this is not really a bad timing. It's just, it's very short term. It's very it's temporary. But they show figures saying that the inflation rate is at this level, the economic growth is at this level. But can we actually rely on the figures and numbers when we have everything happening right in front of our eyes? Can we just let numbers deceive or mislead us like that?
Actually, definitely not. But even the numbers are not looking good, because it's only the inflation which is under control. But other than that, if you look at our budget deficit, which is every time we budget for about 4.8%, but it seems this time also it will go for about 5.3%. Given we were supposed to have the budget on, I think, November 5th or 6th, but since it was postponed, or the parliament being prorogued, for the next year there will be not a budget. So it will be very difficult to maintain the budget discipline, because the government is, I think, planning to have a account and get the approval from the parliament. So, our expenditure will not be controlled and we will not be able to maintain within the specific budget limits or the targets that we have been targeting to move forward. So, even the numbers are not looking good. Even if you do not depend on the numbers, of course, the situation is not looking good. It's quite bad.
Evident, yeah.
Yes. So, that's a sad situation. Not having a budget is of course gonna worsen the situation, because no one really knows what's happening.
Yeah.
And if you look at the past few years, we have been multiple finance ministers and foreign ministers. For an instance,
yeah, exactly. How is that going to happen now? We have Minister of Finance changing constantly within a very short period of time. So whenever they come into the position, they keep changing the policies.
Exactly. So
how is that going to?
That's the reason why investors are not confident in investing.
Right.
If you look at even the Honorable Ranil Wickremesinghe government, even he had, being in a single government, had multiple economic policies. For an instance, in 2016 he introduced an economic policy. He made a statement in the parliament, and the then finance minister proposed a budget completely opposite of what he mentioned in the policy statement. And then again in 2017 September they proposed a 2025 vision. And then again after that the Honorable Wickremesinghe made another policy statement, and which was when the previous finance minister Mangala Samaraweera proposed it, it was somewhat aligned. So if you look at, we had multiple finance ministers for the last 3 years, and if you look at the foreign ministry, because foreign ministry is not all about talking about the human rights and representing the UN. You have to also, it's all about economy, how we reach the better exports market
and the finances of the country.
Exactly. So we had first Honorable Mangala Samaraweera, then we had Honorable Ravi Karunanayaka, then we had Honorable Tilak Marapana, and now we have Honorable Sarath Amunugama for a 3.5 years short period. So that's not going to look proper and good in terms of the foreign representation, because when you go to UN or any other political or economic forum, that looks very bad, because that shows the inconsistency of the policy framework. And even in terms of policy framework, there has been an inconsistency since 2015, because first the government went on a lot of constitutional improvements and developments, which is I think important, but they I think wasted most of the time, the first 11 to 12 months only on the constitution and the budget. As soon as the budget proposed after the election, the interim budget was I think sort of a disaster, because given a 10,000 increment for the public servant, which of course a popular promise, but Azra, we are not in a position to bear that sort of an increment, because we already have about 1.5 million state workers who are literally not adding any value. I am not saying every state employee is not adding any value, but 1.5 million is a big number.
And now we have state workers demanding for a salary hike, and we are not able to give them the required salary. Dannath, let's hold on to that thought. Let's quickly go into a short commercial break. We'll be back. And welcome back. If you're just joining us, I'm in conversation with Dannath Fernando, CEO of the Advocate Institute. Dannath, we were talking about the political instability in the country. Now, I want to specifically focus on the foreign investors' interest in the country and how this has affected them. I mean, how they will not be able to confide and be confident about our markets here in Sri Lanka. How has it?
Yes, Azra. If you look at even when we had a unity government where there was an agreement to implement certain policies, our foreign direct investments were not doing very positive. The government, according to the government V2025 policy document, they expected about $5 billion US dollars by 2025, but it was at around 700 to 800 million. And I think the last year they reached $1 billion US dollars, but that is mainly with the Chinese port deal in Hambantota. So our investment environment was not at all conducive because of the red tape. If you look at the corruption and the kickbacks that the officials are requiring, and the number of documents to business registrations where you have to go up and down, that was not at all conducive for a foreign investor to come and invest. And given that situation, you have of course a very confusing situation at the moment right now. So this is going to be definitely affecting very badly one hand on the foreign direct investment, and that will also have an impact on the currency on the other hand, because we will not bringing enough dollars to cover our imports.
Yeah.
If you look at another perspective, we already have been warned by certain European countries as well as from US on travel bans, and this is the peak season for tourism. And we have been just recognized as the Lonely Planet #1 position to travel for foreigners, and the day after you have this situation. So that will further bring down the dollars that we are bringing into the country, and that will further worsen the situation. So if you look at, though it's sad, the things are not looking good in terms of foreign direct investment. Of course, even when we had a stable government, there were a lot of things that we were supposed to do, which really didn't happen. We were talking about a one-stop shop. Of course, there were certain initiatives happen, but it was not at all conducive for foreigners. And before I conclude on that particular point, our credit rating has also been in risk, and yesterday Moody's Analytics, one of the key credit raters, said we are at about B negative rated. So that is also shows the policy uncertainty and the risk on investing in countries like Sri Lanka.
Focusing on the tourism industry, Dhananath, it's not like we don't have resources in the country. We are geographically gifted by a lot of beautiful places to visit in Sri Lanka, and this decision making and the timing doesn't really seem to be going together and in a way that is beneficial to the country.
You are spot on. Because especially in a time period like this, when we know already we are in a crisis and this is the tourism season, I think we have to be very careful when we are doing the macroeconomic changes and also making political decisions. So that is going to definitely impact the economy. And on the other hand, tourism, I think every time when a tourist board appointed, they always come up with a new tagline, which is not the requirement to develop tourism. Of course, we need to have a payoff for a tagline, because earlier we were at Wonder of Asia, small country, big miracle, and now so Sri Lanka, and we had like multiple taglines. But if you look at other countries, they are only running on a single tagline. It's not the payoff line. It's the conducive environment for a tourist to come and have a pleasant stay. But today, if you see, if someone comes to Colombo from the airport, the roads are all blocked, and no one hardly can transport crossing Colombo. So tourists won't like it, because they are spending their precious time and money when they are doing a travel plan. So things are, in that sense, we are our planning is zero, and it's going to worsen the situation, though it's a bad news.
And it seems like nothing is really constant right now in Sri Lanka. I mean, everything is very temporary and indecisive and things like that. Shifting your focus towards the stock market, we see like a sudden rise in the stock market. What options can you give us when it comes to a situation like this?
It's too early to predict, because it was just happened yesterday. There could be two things. One is actually the investors have confidence and invested money, given if you look at the former Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe and President Maithripala Sirisena for the last few months, or like for a couple of years, since after the first 2-3 months, their policy direction was clearly on two different directions. Prime Minister was going on one direction, and he had his this economic council, and then the president appointed his national economic council. So it was clearly going on two different directions. But given the appointment with the new Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa, they have been in the same party, so things could have been at least consistent. That could have been a sentiment which drove, if people genuinely invested money, that could have been one reason, or it could be, of course, artificially invested just to bring the numbers up. So then you show with the political appointments, now the stock market is doing good, so to create sort of an artificial wave.
How vulnerable are we when it comes to a situation like that, especially for the second option that you just mentioned?
I think it's too early to comment, but I think if you are creating an indication like that by artificially pumping money and bringing it up, it, of course, with time it will show. Again, it will go down, because you can't artificially pump money, for a long period of time. It could be a short term indication, but ultimately when the investors realize the policy is again uncertain, and given we are planning more elections to come in, and President announced announced, in the sense he said he want to have the provincial council elections first, and then there will be a parliamentary election, then there will be a presidential election. So with that, investors will be very reluctant to invest money.
Right. We'll be back after this short commercial break. Don't go away. This is the Biz in Focus. Hello and welcome back to Biz in Focus. I'm in conversation with Dhananath Fernando, CEO of the Advocata Institute. Dhananath, now we've been, now they have already made a decision to prorogue Parliament until the 16th of November. Suppose it's getting postponed and it goes on for another month or 2 or 3 months. How will that affect the community, I mean the business community?
That would be the worst case scenario, because then no one will be, the entire country will be in limbo, so they really don't know what to do. That would definitely in the sense it has already affected, and that could worsen the situation. I mean, it could also lead sort of a civil uprising, because people, when people are not very secure with the situation, given the Sri Lankan sentiment is more lean towards the government, because Sri Lankans generally expect everything to be provided by the government.
Yeah.
So when they really don't have a government to lean back, there will be unpredicted situations in the country, including becoming violent. So that would be the worst scenario. Of course, that will have a big impact on the economy. So our kind request has to be to bring this issue to a resolve as urgent as fast as possible, because if you look at the government, as I mentioned, we have 1.5 million government employees, and actually they are overstaffed. So actually they are, other than doing a protest or anything, they are not really doing anything productive. And according to the last statement by the secretary for the Ministry of Finance, we need to raise about 900 billion rupees to pay the salaries and the pension of the government workers. That is a big amount. That is with debt servicing coming to about 84% of our national income, only to pay the salaries, debt servicing and the pensions. So to build a bridge, to build the anicuts, all the other expenses, if you keep it aside, only 84% completely gone on just paying salaries and pensions plus the debt servicing. So that's big amount, and we are of course not in a position of our economy is not in shape to bear that sort of an expenditure. Given the elections are coming, it is very likely that there will be more promises given to these state sector employees. And if you look at their policy, their strategy, everything will be upside down, because the earlier government had a national export strategy. There were multiple strategies being formulated, and with the new government everything will be reversed. So the time, money, effort spent on last 3 years or 4 years, it would be completely wasted. And the dangerous situation would be, there is a new government working on the same thing, but we are expecting another election after about 14 to 16 months.
And it seems like we'll have to start everything from scratch. And how much time do we have to do all of this?
We are already late. We have already missed the bus, and this policy uncertainty is a big problem in Sri Lanka and in most of the third world countries. But in Sri Lanka, this situation was, I think, no one really expected, and this will also lead the youth to consider options to migrate, because people then consider, if we are not getting incentivized, if your hard work is not paid off, or the government is not seem stable, then it's natural that you think for foreign careers to progress and to do a degree, to go overseas and settle down there, which has already been happening, but it will more stimulate the situation.
Now Dhananath, you are an expert in your industry and talk about numbers, stats and figures and all of that, but people are watching us right now, and the people who are actually going through this struggle, they might not want to know about these numbers and all that, and the struggle they go through is what they can put actually into words. What is your take on things that is currently happening in the country right now, and how do you think we can get out of this situation with the high cost of living, then fuel prices, and which leads to high transport costs, then food and all of that? What do you think that we as a country can do to get rid of this situation and return back to normalcy?
first of all, they have to resolve this urgent, immediate situation very fast, and have a proper policy framework. Whatever the government comes in, have a proper policy framework where whoever who comes to office to work from there, when a government leave, to start from there. But it has to be sort of a not a government centric policy, because when you, this is the other problem, because when you put lot of focus on the government and the government changes, and of course your policy is going to change.
Yeah.
But if you limit the government and if you allow the space for people to work,
as in the government's involvement,
exactly, the government's involvement, if you limit the government's involvement, then the people will have an incentive for their hard work. Because now what happens is, when people do hard work and the government intervene, and everything is going to get reversed, and we have a majority in the government sector, so they are anyway lean towards the government. So when you have a limited government, it will have more space for people to work, so then they will have the incentive. But it's not an overnight policy decision, that comes slowly and slowly, but you have to ensure that policy framework, so people will be incentivized for their hard work. That would be the long term solution. And so then the people will come up with innovations, they will consider taking on the export industry, and because none of the government entities are not supporting exports. I mean, they have this EDB, those are the supporting bodies, but ultimately it's you and I, the private sector, the small entrepreneurs are the one who are exporting and bringing the dollars. It's same as the foreign services that we do.
Yeah.
Our employees are women going abroad and sending back money. So it is the people who are actually carrying this weight. It's not the government. What the government can do is limit the government and government intervention. Exactly what has happened now, they are intervening everywhere. So as you have like limited government interventions, and the people have the space to work hard, so they will get for the amount that they work, and it would be a more free and a conducive environment for the investors to come and invest and take a profit.
Now, just like you suggested, do we have a talent shortage in the country in case we limit the government's intervention into this, and do we have learned and educated people in the country to make decisions?
We have educated people, but of course what we as a policy think tank always encourage is to work with other people from other industries as well. For an instance, I think the best example is your news channel. You have been producing programs which is compatible with the global programs. If you look at all the reality programs that you have been doing, all the Lakshapati program, those have been all globally recognized programs, and you have been able to keep up to that level because you have the talent, and of course I am sure you must be getting the consultancy services from the other countries and the experts as well. So there is talent here. Of course that's our main strength, but it further strengthens,
and it's underutilized.
Exactly. It's underutilized, but it further strengthen when you work with the people from other countries as well, because you are bringing their human potential to stimulate the underutilized potential within you to contribute more. So it's important that we work with foreigners. I think there's a fear sometimes when you say there are foreign workers coming in, and of course there are certain things that we have to keep in mind. I'm not saying like bring everybody and work, but it's indeed a conducive environment if we have some of the foreigners to work with us, because if you look at the youth, that's what they are expecting. The first question they would ask in an interview is, what's the exposure that I am getting? Am I getting to travel overseas, to get foreign training? Those were the young professionals generally ask questions in these days in an interview. So that shows their hunger to get the potential and the human capital from other countries. So I think we have to enhance that, but we have potential within the country, and the important thing is you have to synergize.
Yeah.
And so then we will be able to come up with more innovations and more export oriented industries which will drive the economy forward.
Thank you, Dhananath Fernando, for joining us on Biz in Focus tonight, and that's it from us. Take care and good night.